reconvene the special board meeting of May 2nd, 2018. It is 5:23. And if you could please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have nothing to report out from closed session. So I'm going to ask for approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda. Also,
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. This is an opportunity for the open time for the public to raise issues not on the agenda or to ask for future agenda items. Members of the public may address the board regarding issues that are within the Ross Valley Sanitary District's jurisdiction. The board cannot make any decisions at this time. Any open time? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to number 7. Consideration of approval of a draft comment letter to Larkspur General Plan Update Committee. There's a letter attached. Greg, do you want to talk about this briefly?
Sure, I'll give us a quick introduction because it is, we were aware of this topic, but I think it has sort of come to the board's attention in a somewhat abrupt fashion, and I'll explain why. For background, the city of Larkspur, I think all of you have been around long enough, you know all the history. From a general plan development perspective, they were moving along with the required periodic update of their general plan. And somewhere about the 2010-11 period, they put that primary effort on hold in a sense and spent a couple of years working on the what's called the station area plan, which was a more specific plan for that that area of Larkspur Landing and so forth. When that process reached its end point, they sort of regrouped, and in 2017 roughly they started renewed the formal process to complete the general plan update. So they basically, as I understand it, and this is just interpretation of the staff reports and so forth, they basically picked up where they left off and said, okay, here's the work left to be done. So they have a working committee made up of 2 city council members, and that working committee has been facilitating with staff to have a series of public meetings on different aspects of the general plan update. One of them so we were aware of this, let me start there, but we didn't see it initially as something that had a lot of impact on the district because the zoning status of that parcel of 2,000 Larkspur Landing has been settled since, at this point, 2005. Like, okay, we'll just keep an eye on things. So shifted a little bit to the side here. At the same time, we've been trying to reinvigorate and start conversations with the city of Larkspur staff to get our operations based on a more proper permitting status with the city. And the short version of that is we're in this gray area right now. The history goes back to when we first started using that site, but the short version is we don't really have a proper permit in a sense with the city of Larkspur, and we'd like to be good neighbors and get to that status. We thought we had a path forward to do that at the staff level, and upon more careful consideration, it was noted that because of the way the approved map for the precise plan that got adopted in about 506 showed, this certain, let me just refer you to the staff report. Take a look at the map. It's fairly old, but it's easy to see where you're at. It's this picture, pretty straightforward, to Francis Way, Larkspur Landing. And that big lower half that's labeled residential high density, well, if you can recognize the site, that's where our operations base is. So we're technically not in compliance, and that makes it very difficult. That sort of said, okay, the staff level approval process is not an option because you have this inherent conflict that's already going to have to go to the planning commission. So then we said, well, okay, let's maybe it is time to pay more attention to this general plan update process and see if there's an opportunity, working with the city staff and the current process, to essentially get the internal lines removed from this map, as the way it was put in layperson's terms. And again, this really only became apparent in the last I'd say 3 or 4 weeks, we thought, okay, we have a path, then we found out we didn't. We did some research and said, okay, let's see if we can find a way that doesn't disrupt the general plan update process, because we don't want to open up everything about the site. We want to do the most limited prescribed change that meets our goal, which is simply to be able to work with the city and get a proper interim use permit. And secondly, and this is points in the staff report, and this is where the board certainly needs to weigh in and discuss this evening. The board made a policy commitment several years ago for unrestricted land use as a remediation goal for this parcel, and that was done for a number of public policy reasons at the time. And in hindsight now, when you look at this map, what you can see is, well, all that effort to make this site as flexible as possible is really countered by the precise nature of these internal lines, because you can only have commercial here and so forth. So what we're trying to do is ask for consideration of whatever the appropriate changes are, and this process has like a year to run, so it's not a real hurry up, so that the 2,000 Uxbridge landing parcel still retains the quantitative characteristics and targets established in the general plan, but it effectively gets rid of these internal lines so that the parties can move forward in a more flexible manner. That's it.
Okay, so to clarify, we're not asking for any zoning change whatsoever. We're not asking for anything to be added. We're not asking for anything to be taken away. On the zoning, on the use of the property.
The first part of that is probably a little bit of a gray, because it depends if you interpret getting rid of these lines as a zoning change.
Well,
So, yeah.
Okay. We're not asking it to be zoned for something else that's not zoned for at this time.
Correct.
We don't
When you
a golf course.
take the 10-acre parcel roughly in its entirety, you're not asking for any changes.
That's right.
That's the-
So one of the reasons that this doesn't make sense is on this map, at the back of the map, is the public facilities, but in fact, we're using the public facilities in the front of the map.
Currently, yes.
And if this property, and again, I think we've been clear here on this board a number of times, that we don't have a plan at this time for what we're doing here. And that needs to be brought out to the public, and the public needs to be involved in that, and the public needs to decide, the ratepayers and the town of Larkspur, and all of the ratepayers in the Ross Valley Sanitary District should have an opportunity to comment on what exactly is going to happen here. But it makes a lot more sense to have these internal lines removed, because for one thing, it just personally, if I was designing property, I wouldn't put a public facility right next to those houses. That wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure this was that well thought out. So that's what we're asking, is for the internal lines to be removed.
We're also asking for I underlined it. We're asking them to zone it as unrestricted futures. Thank you. Finally found it. I've underlined it. Unrestricted future land use. And the zoning plan, as I understand it, is just the opposite of that. They try to figure out what they're going to use it for. And it isn't our, we can just comment on it. It's Larkspur's.
That's right.
You know what I think we ought to do is, or maybe we should turn it over to the public and then get back.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. Is there any
I was
public
gonna
comment?
say, I was going to say the same thing, that I think this is great discussion. I think it's a move to move ahead, which is overdue. I also think this is the Hooper's plan. It was his plan, the one that dissolved and we were sued and all
This is
that.
campus plan.
I mean, well, the Hooper's the guy. So it's a good idea for have a new start. I think it's good not to be restrictive to some degree, I do. But I kind of think maybe we should think about, and maybe see what the public says, to continue it, to get more input about yay or nay or whatever. That's all.
Is there a deadline for this letter?
Well, they're doing,
There is not a deadline for this letter. We basically, like I said, when this sort of came to our attention, and they have already had the one workshop on land use, they've sort of moved on to other subjects. So we simply wanted to get something on the record as quickly as we can, and the reason it's on this meeting is quite simple. It was a matter of timing as to when we became aware of it. In fact, we already have a meeting scheduled. We said it would be better to do this now than to wait. But to be clear, this letter can be wordsmithed and tweaked for another, I don't know, I'd say reasonably a couple of weeks. The city staff are aware of these issues as well, and they obviously have access to this evening's board package, so it's not that, Neil and Dan and company are not unaware of this.
If it's the meeting that you're referring to, is that the meeting I went to?
The working committee?
There were
Yeah.
3 people in the
Yeah.
public from there.
Yeah.
3 people in the room. And you were not asked to engage.
Yeah.
So it was just a dialogue between their staff and the 2 council. So it was very disappointing. I just think this whole thing needs to be vetted more.
Do you have any public comment?
Did you want to say something?
No, I work here.
Oh.
Thank you.
Wait, you're public? I'm Bob Silvestri, Community Edge Partners. I wanted to just say a couple things for clarification real quick. All of Larkspur Landing is governed by what's called a master PD process. So plan development means that any developer that looked at this property in the future would have to actually go through a new plan development anyway, which would, in the assumption of plan development, is everything is vacated except the things that are ordered in this letter. In other words, this letter is essentially recommending they do now what will happen anyway when someone comes to do it. Unless someone comes with a plan where they absolutely, down to the inch, don't want to move anything and want to build a public facility for some new agent. I mean, and I've had a lot of discussions with Neil Toft and the planning department and others about this. I mean, the only way a developer, I being an interested developer, would approach this is we'd have to go through a new PD. And so that would say, okay, all these lines are gone. What are the new lines? What are the new uses? Now, the things that are fixed here, essentially fixed. One is fixed by law, by SB 35 in 2017, that's the number of housing units, and one is fixed by the city's desire, the hotel.
I'm sorry, the what?
The city wants a hotel.
Yeah.
And, a 100-room, well-designed boutique hotel in that location will bring $1 million a year in revenues to the city. It's a very important piece of real estate to them, and it's a prime hotel.
Not to them? Just said to them.
Well, unless you want to be the developer and own the land and sell it to a hotel, which you have that option to do. But the reality is they want a hotel. SB 35 that was passed, signed into law in last year in September, it says now that any designation in the general plan for unit counts that included any affordability can no longer be changed without specific findings that are very narrow. So any developer coming forward has to build at least, it doesn't say what kind, whether they're apartments or townhouses, but they're going to have to build 126 units of a reasonable levels of income mix. And so that'll have to be planned into development. So those are the givens. If you want a yard or you want something, then you could argue for that as a use, because it's a
You
present.
mean a yard for the utility?
Yeah.
That's what you got, the yard, okay.
I mean, it's essentially what you're saying up by the housing, which is really weird, is essentially a use. I mean, that's a zoned use in a sense. Now, if you take that out, the only things that I know will remain will be the need to put housing there, whoever develops it, and the need to put a hotel there because the city will strongly request it. So even though it's PD, and even though that means all bets are off and the zoning is removed, the zoning can be changed, anything can be changed in the PD, it can be ignored, heights, setbacks, everything. They're going to pretty much want those 2 things. So I endorse the letter because, and I'll be in your shoes for a minute, if you should choose, which has been suggested and discussed but not decided, to sell the property outright, you are in a better position as a seller with this unrestricted kind of mapping, so that any developer can come in and say, well, I'd like to put a hotel, on Francis Drake, or I'd like to put it up where the view is better, or I'd like to put the housing in the back or in the front. In other words, that increases the value of the property to have it. So that, from your standpoint, it's a no-brainer. Now, and I don't think the city would resist, because when I've talked to Neil, he's basically said, well, just if I could, sorry to take so much time, but, we've been working on a community-supported, community-serving proposal, which I'm grateful to say we now have financial wherewithal to purchase and develop. And ours includes assisted living, senior assisted, all the way from partial to full memory care. It includes 32 units in partnership with Lifehouse for people who live in Marin with disabilities, moderate income senior housing, and a 120-room hotel. So we have a proposal that we've talked to the city about to these exact questions. I mean, this is our question, like, oh, wait a minute, this we can build and we can afford to build and the community will support it and it serves the community. What do we do about this crazy thing up here where it says there's going to be trucks next to the assisted living? So, so I'm here to say I think this is a good idea for the people in my shoes and people in your shoes who may be potentially selling. And also we have in our plan a central park, a new public park in the middle of the whole thing with a bandstand.
He says looking at Michael.
Okay. Hang on, Michael. Hold on, any other public comment?
I have a question.
Sure.
It may have a simple answer, it may not. This land is owned by a public entity, so it's public land at some point.
Well, it belongs to Ross Valley Sanitary District.
Right.
Which is part of it.
Exactly.
It's owned by the public, of
And
course.
isn't there a state requirement about how surplus public land is to be disposed of?
There is.
And does this comply with it?
Well, I would definitely defer to Andrea Clark, who's not on the call. She has provided guidance to the board in the past on this. And in general, there are some allowances for first right of refusal by certain types of local government or nonprofit. I think maybe government for sure. That's about all we're aware of. And there's, so that's to the best of my knowledge, that's first right of refusal at market rates. So it just means they have to be given the opportunity. So that's it.
I'd like to direct that same question to Bob, since he's had to examine this. Does that restriction by the state interfere with what you want to do with the land at all?
No, it's true of everything, and it's procedural more than anything else. The restrictions are really, you have to follow.
I think what Greg, I will turn to Greg, and I recall this correctly, is at market rates.
Yes.
So the market rate's going to be kind of high for this property, so that may preclude certain uses not in by law, but in how it's actually.
In reality.
In reality. Okay, any other public comment? Okay, we're bringing it back to the board. Do you want to say something?
No, I think it's a curious thing to say that we want them to remove the lines. I think there might be a more formal way of saying that from a legal perspective. Perhaps we just want the entire property zoned block. I'm not sure what
Why don't
it
we
is.
wordsmith that now so we can get this out, if we want, if the board so desires.
Yeah, and I would defer to Andrea on that. And I believe there's a typo. It says the district
I wanna- are we-
of polity instead of policy.
Hold on.
Are we making a
Yes.
decision on this right now? Or are we, because
We're asking for a
there
decision.
was some discussion.
We're not done with our
with
discussion.
Tom.
No, I said if
Tom,
that's what the board decides.
Well, I have a lot of comments.
Okay,
Yeah.
so why don't we go to you? Are you done, Mary?
Sure.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Well, I have comments. I personally don't think we should send this letter.
Okay.
Until we get, I think we're talking about an asset that's potentially worth $30 million, and I don't think we ought to wing it. I think we need some help on how to do this. I don't categorically agree that unrestricted use is more valuable than this. I don't agree with that, because to change this zoning for somebody to come in with an unrestricted use, they're going to have to then get it zoned. And that's gonna take 5 years.
Can I clarify something? I thought there might be, yeah, let me, I thought this might be the case. Tom, I apologize for interrupting that. So there, I think we're conflating two terms in terms of the context. So we are not saying that the district's policy is that the district, that the parcel be able to be used for any zone, like zone it for whatever you want. The term unrestricted use is in the context of the EPA remediation, saying that when you are done remediating this site, it's available and suitable for basically any legitimate purpose, housing, preschool, park. That's the unrestricted future land use context. The zoning is not our business, the zoning is the city's business, so I think we may have confused those two, and the wording is poor, we can fix that.
So
We're not asking for this to be,
what kind of zoning are we requesting them to do then?
Well, we want to zone it for public facilities, open space, commercial, and residential high density, but not specifically in these boxes they've drawn.
Can you do that?
Yeah, I think I can clarify.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you introduce yourself?
yeah.
I'm Albert DeLima, I'm an architect in town. Felicia has asked me to help her read through some of these things and organize the thoughts, and I did a precursor to this letter that this one's based on. But the zoning is plan development, and it will still be zoned plan development afterwards. This letter is just asking them to open up their policy with the general plan, not to rezone the lot. The lot will still be zoned plan development, and by that, it'll still be dictated by the land use map and so on, and we would still have to amend the land use map to do anything, but we want to encourage the city to be flexible and have an open mind when somebody comes in to modify the land use map, which essentially modifies the general plan because the general plan adopted the land use map.
How long would that take normally, and given the fact that this is a sensitive area because of the traffic?
It will take months. To
Years?
get
It'll
the,
take
to
years?
get the approval.
It'll take years.
It'll take years.
Well, it depends.
It's going to be contentious.
It will be contentious, probably. It depends on what the sanitary district comes up with. I mean, there's a study going on right now, and this district may decide we don't want the land. In which case, then the asking for the policy to be more flexible will be beneficial in adding to the value of somebody coming in there. They won't have their hands tied so tightly by the policy. Right now, the recommendation, as I read it in the policy, was to encourage the approved plan development. That's the city's general plan policy right now, which means unless somebody comes in with that plan that's in front of you, the policy of the city is to say no, as opposed to them saying, well, we're open to moving these lines or reassessing the property for any developer.
Yeah, that's a good, so someone, Mary, I think you noted, the language about removing the lines isn't reading quite well, and I agree. And Albert, I think part of what we tried to say in here is we'll leave it up to the experts in a sense how best to do this. And in updating the letter to its current draft, that's probably something that we sort of didn't bring in as well as we could have. He's been referring to city policy. They have a general plan policy that quite logically says, if there's a precise plan follow it. It's a, you know,
That's
it's a regional
Yeah.
policy, right?
That's right.
Don't be willy-nilly, don't have a precise plan and then one day decide you're gonna go off and do something different. Now, the problem with that policy in our case is, it made sense when you thought that building was gonna happen in the next couple of years, but here you are almost 15 years later, that was never, we don't think, the intent of the policy to follow the precise plan that's on the books. So maybe, for example, a better way that, for them to do this procedurally is to, what I think we're suggesting is modify, you're in the process of updating your general plan. Remember, that's the big trend.
Large
we're trying to go- Yeah, we're trying to get on to.
We don't have the general plan.
Under your policy update, reword that to
Right.
make the flexible, to de-emphasize the rigidity of this and make it clearly flexible. That reads better than removing the lines and so forth, and it maybe is, that's again why we want to find the right people to help us write the language. This is just to open the conversation.
And maybe what we should do, and we can discuss this further, is have this letter wordsmithed and bring it back on the 15th.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We just
and
wanted
that's
to-
why I brought up in the beginning, this is eliminating the precise plan.
It-
Yes.
That's what I say it is.
It will not eliminate the precise plan.
Right.
The general plan update, they don't have the, maybe, I don't know, they may have the power to eliminate the precise plan that's in there right now, but as of right now, there's no actions to eliminate it. It's been approved and it went through due process.
So we're asking them to eliminate it by doing this. Is that
So we're asking them to keep an open
It
mind.
takes off the restraints.
and
It takes
not-
off the restraints.
Not have a policy of encouraging only
This,
that, exactly.
Correct.
Well,
I'm just speaking, I'm not a developer. I wouldn't do this if I had my option. I wouldn't do that.
And we don't even want this anymore, right? We don't intend to park
Maybe
trucks up on the
we
Do
top.
we want to put our trucks in the back, next to the houses?
Yeah.
you know, but I'm saying that a developer figured this was a.
No, any developer, one,
One developer.
and 15 years ago.
Okay, and so this has been going on for 15 years,
Mhm.
or, well, I don't know how long we started before that. That's what I'm worried about. We're gonna change something, and then we're gonna be 15 years before we can do it.
But see, that's Hooper's argument, right? Is that he has the only plans that have been
He
approved
does.
and somebody should
He
come
keeps
buy his
arguing
plans. And that's not true. I mean,
That's right.
this is restart, right?
Yeah.
This is, nobody has any, this,
Like-
all of this is basically, based on what you said, as I understand, all this is basically like gonna be wiped clean, except for maybe a policy of preferring
Well,
something like
and
this.
if I could add, Hooper's plan is lost, because you have to take action within so many years. And he hasn't taken action, so his approval for his specific
That's
project
good.
is gone. He can't like come back tomorrow and go,
But this is.
I can do it.
I would like us to have somebody analyze, I think this is extremely valuable. I just don't understand
Right.
this. I'm not ready to say, let's do this.
Well, yeah.
I just think that I would like, I don't know, a city planner.
Or Andrea, or somebody
An
like.
architect.
An architect.
Or
So-
somebody who knows zoning
No.
and is,
Well,
I
I think.
just don't know, I'm reluctant to do
That's a
this,
good question.
to make the statement, but I don't know very much.
Yeah, and I did talk to, because I was a planning commissioner for 8 years, and I did call an old friend, urban planner, Berkeley grad, done housing elements up the wazoo, and his comment after he saw the letter was, you don't want to hold up the land. You don't want to have those kind of restraints. So I agree, though, that the community needs.
What kind of constraints? I don't know constraints.
To have to
I don't want to
stick,
have these.
you have to stick to this plan.
Yes.
If it gets in the next,
Well,
if
that's
it gets in
what I want
the
to
plan,
find out.
right?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so, okay. All right,
If this map gets in, what gets adopted, then it will have restrictive
It
qualities.
restricts your ability as a seller, as a developer,
Yeah.
I'm gonna defeat it anyway. I mean, I'm gonna go in, and I've already done it. I've already met with the head of planning, I've already met with city council members, I said, I don't want this.
So they're gonna.
And so what's it gonna cost me to get rid of it? You know?
And make it, they'll change this.
And that comes out of what I can
to make it
pay.
commercial. It's much easier to do.
Yeah.
Then
Wait a minute. I'm not an architect, I'm not a developer.
A developer's gonna come in.
No, maybe you want commercial right there, right off the street.
Yeah.
So what I think we're all saying is, if you just make this a blank slate with this current zoning options, nothing like, you can't make it an amusement park or a golf course, but if you just take away the map and say, draw what you want and come to the city of Larkspur and we'll meet you about it, because it's going to be the city of Larkspur that's going to approve these plans.
Okay.
Why do we have to say the only open space you can have is right here? You can't have open space here next to housing. There's no way you can current housing. There's no way you want to park right
I
next to
just want
current
to
housing.
find out
If there's any downside.
the downside.
That's fine. So that's fine. And I have no problem with that. How would you like to go about that?
Get more information.
I think we should need to get a really experienced consultant.
The downside.
There's no downside to asking the city to adopt a policy that opens up the opportunity for somebody to come and revisit. It doesn't negate the existing zoning. It doesn't.
Yeah, they can put this map right there.
Yeah, that map is still active until they approve the next one. So there's no downside. The only downside is that, you know, the city knows we're more willing to work with them, or, you know, I don't see any downside to it.
And if I could provide a couple of pieces of information, I think that one of the reasons that this is before the board now is because the city of Larkspur is in their general plan update process, which is a really just very good opportunity for us, or, you know, we're in the hands of a private developer. It would be a good opportunity for any landowner to come to the land use authority, which is the city of Larkspur, at the time that they're under a general plan update, and have us be able to comment on it. Once the general plan is adopted, that process becomes a little bit more onerous to go through. So it's just, we thought staff would be a good opportunity to make it known that the district is, and the city of Larkspur knows this, currently operating in a non-compliant manner.
We're in violation.
There's that.
We're currently in violation of the city's zoning.
And we very happily move up there and ruin these.
Yeah,
Can you put the sewer trucks right by the house?
So Felicia, they're gonna have to do something regardless, right?
Well, they'd like to work with us, I
Thank
think.
you.
Greg had a conversation with
That's what I was
Neil.
gonna ask.
Yeah, they don't wanna be sued.
No, because remember, I know it's somewhat of a short-term objective, but it's not unimportant, which is, again, we need to, we've emphasized that we need 3 to 5 years of practical flexibility to have a functioning site, and for whatever does happen to this area to move forward, because, you know, it's gonna take time. And we want that to be a facility that isn't an eyesore, that doesn't violate, you know, stormwater BMPs, that is, and is compatible from a permitting perspective with the district. And we're willing to give you something in return. We're willing to do sidewalks, fencing.
We can't do the sidewalks because it would violate the zoning right now. No, is that true?
Well, no, we could do sidewalks. And we've offered to do all of that to help upgrade the aesthetics of the
But
site.
they can't approve it administratively.
Right, and so it's kind of this catch-22, right? And so what we're asking them to do, let me back up. When I described this to Neil on the phone the other day, to my relief, he said, because I called him and said, look, I hope we're not, whatever, gumming up your guys' works, because that's not our goal. He said, actually, no. He said, your goal is to keep the same overall outcomes of the site in terms of housing and so on, but you are emphasizing that they should just have flexibility in terms of the layout and so forth. He's like, that's pretty much where we're at too. That's where their working committee is. So everyone I think has looked at this and kind of come to the same conclusion. And it's not to diminish the concerns you're expressing, Tom. I mean, is about due diligence. It's a valuable piece of real estate. But generally speaking, what we've heard is you can't really box yourself in or have a downside by making this more flexible. Now, the key thing I think we face right now is what's the most reasonable and legitimate way to do that. From a procedural perspective, because we can't square the land use and get the sidewalk and the upgrades done, which would be nice, and our crew's working conditions. If, to the extent that that's tied to the general plan amendment process, that goes into 2019, I think, at this point, so it's a long, slow train, for good reason. It may not be possible, but what we want to find out working with Neil and company is there any reasonable, not something too contorted, way that lets us get to that point quicker, we'll just put it that way. And maybe that's asking too much, but at a minimum, we do want those changes, and they don't oppose it. They think making the site more flexible is something that they support.
I read this letter, I couldn't figure out what.
Okay.
Can we rewrite the letter and bring it back
Yes,
next meeting?
we can, we learned a lot.
No, I think we just said it over.
Could I just make
Thanks.
a
I thought we
last
could
comment? I just
go
want to say that
Yeah.
consider that the city now has to formally, legally look at this way. They are to say, if these guys want this map to remain, they are telling us that this is exactly how they want the
That's
property to be. So your message to them, if you do nothing, is we want this map. We don't want flexibility.
No, we're back in 2 weeks. We have time in 2 weeks, do we not?
We do. The only thing I would say is that the general plan update steering committee at the City of Larkspur meets next on May 15th, which of course is the day before the Ross Valley Sanitary
Hold on,
District.
hold on.
But,
No, hang
yeah.
on.
That's
Mary's gone. Can I make a motion that we write a letter to the steering committee saying we'd like to
We're
follow
following
the letter.
our land.
That we're gonna write a letter for them probably tomorrow. We're writing a letter. It'll come out after our next meeting.
Heads up.
Regarding our problem.
Regarding our issue. Yeah, no problem. Is that okay?
yeah,
Sure.
Can you write a simple letter like that and I'll sign it?
That's
Wait,
okay.
wait. When will the letter come out?
No, we're sending them a letter right now, saying we're gonna write you a letter coming out after our next meeting.
Not this letter.
Saying, okay.
So that right now, we're simply alerting them that there's going to be a letter coming out of our next
Just
meeting.
because of the timing of the meetings, you're gonna.
And if I want to add some comments to it, I just send them to Greg.
No, this first letter is just saying we're having a letter.
I know, but the second letter,
The second letter is going to be discussed at the next meeting.
okay,
It's going to be on the agenda.
okay.
It's because everybody wants to have input.
I do have
And so
one
it'll be
comment.
that entire letter. He can I'm sorry. Can you talk to him about the wordsmithing? Sure, because he'll come up with some suggestions, but the entire letter will be on the next agenda in front of the full board.
Okay.
Do I have a motion for that?
Yes.
Second? All in favor?
And it doesn't mean the letter's going to go out. It's just saying
No, we're
No,
sending
this
it.
that.
letter.
Double checking.
Okay.
Now, I do have one
You
general
talk
comment.
fast.
In 10 acres here, there's 10.675 in the ordinance, and there's 10.5 somewhere.
I always don't know.
We gotta figure out the area of
Okay.
that.
All right. Do we have any other,
Something important.
no, any notes from the council, board members about anything they'd like to talk about? No, seeing none, the meeting's adjourned.
Okay.